Now, on this episode of the Entrepreneurial Edge, we'll be taking a look at two woman entrepreneurs. Fitting as it is, Women's Day on the 9th of August, that day when tens of thousands of women activists took their courage in their hands and marched on the South African Parliament asking for their rights. And a lot of people got arrested on the day, and it's part of the struggle forward. Now, with me here, I have two women who no doubt would have marched on Parliament if they'd been around in 1956. We've got Pratt and Stella Buthelezi, two of our guests for this episode. Just to start off with you, Anne, you're a self-made businesswoman, a leader and a multi-awarded director of one of South Africa's leading executive search companies. And Stella Buthelezi, you are a dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur who learned at your father's knee, and you've got your own businesses doing property and cosmetics, I understand. To start out, the father influence in both of you. You were very, very close to your father, as you said before the show. How do you think that affected you in terms of becoming an entrepreneur when you grew up?
Well, my father was quite a pioneering guy in his own right. He came out from the UK to South Africa, so I think his sense of adventure, his pioneering spirit, and yeah, he travelled a lot, and I think that also opens us up to very diverse, different environments.
Now, Stella, you grew up in the Eastern Cape, and I'm going to mention your father's name on this programme because it is a name to conjure with, Mr. Gosli Speedo Nondumo. Yes. Now, you say when you grew up in the Eastern Cape, he was something of a real entrepreneur.
Yes, he was.
How did he affect you when you were growing up?
I think I'm the person I am today because of my dad. I was very close to him growing up. You know, I've followed him everywhere. I mean, you know, my earliest memories, going to the market with him, always around him. In fact, at times I'd even go to meetings with him, you know, so he's a great figure. He's a great man with a big heart. And yeah, so everything, I'm my father's girl, you know.
And just briefly, how did he make his money as an entrepreneur?
My father started, I mean, back in the days, I suppose, you know, as a black man, we know the history of the country, started off, you know, with a house shop and then progressed to a small supermarket. And then from there on, you know, the supermarket grew. There was a own consumption. In fact, I think he got the first own consumption, you know, to sell wines in the supermarket, and then had a butchery. And then from there on, had a couple of service stations and bottle stores. And growing up, we would go, me and my brothers, I'm an only girl with 3 brothers, would go and work in the businesses. So it was just part of my growing up life. You know, I grew up behind a counter, behind a till, pumping petrol, over the counter at the bottle store. You
name it, you were there. Okay. So, Anne, what was that moment in your life when you thought, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to work for myself?
You know, interesting question. I was with Unilever, recruited from university at that point in time. I really thought I'd do the whole multinational corporate thing my entire life. But I think the turning point was I had a part-time fashion clothing business. And although I was the senior brand manager in Lever Brothers, that year I actually earned more as a 50% partner in my part-time fashion clothing business. And I just thought, you know, there's something about entrepreneurship that is different, adventurous and higher risk, and I liked the unpredictability of that. So I think that was a turning moment.
And how long did that first business survive, the one you started?
I didn't start it. I actually joined it with a partner. The business did very well. It sustained, and then I went on to other ventures from there.
But everyone says this about, you know, it was a great decision in their lives to be an entrepreneur. But surely being an entrepreneur as well is headaches, staff problems, paperwork, tax returns. I mean, surely isn't that a thing to put people off? Didn't your dad put you off?
No, that didn't put me off. Like I say, for me, it was just a natural progression in life. So the challenges, I actually enjoyed them. You know, I mean, there's challenges in any aspect of life anyway, even if you're not in business. So it's just how you handle them and you soldier on.
Do you have any regrets of being an entrepreneur?
Not at all. I've loved it, and you know, I've been involved in different businesses. I was involved in a restaurant during my MBA. I had another fashion clothing business after that before I went back to corporate, and yeah, so it's been a stepping stone, but it's an exciting, pioneering adventure.
And what difficulties do you face now? We're talking about Women's Month, as women starting out as entrepreneurs. But surely, I mean, the Constitution in South Africa is behind you. You've got equal rights. You've got everything. The field is wide open. And what difficulties do you still face?
Well, you know, my business, or my property business, that is, you know, it's commercial property. It's very much male-dominated. So sometimes it's just not being taken seriously. But, you know, it's not, it doesn't bother me because, you know, I take myself seriously. But I think that's, you know, it can put one off at times. And also I have a very successful husband. So sometimes it's also like, you know, oh, bored housewife. You know, you're just not taken seriously enough at times.
Must hurt a bit.
Not really, no.
Doesn't hurt?
No, very few things rattle me.
And do you get this problem and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I think, you know, there are challenges sometimes for women. I think, you know, yeah, I think it's also about how seriously women take themselves. I think the initial startup is more difficult because one has many more balls in the air, trying to balance different things. You've got startup capital, you've got to establish a reputation, a brand name. But with time, I think it gets a bit easier. And as one builds one's brand image and brand equity. But having said that, I think something I learned from my first MD at Lever Brothers is beware of the Garfield fat cat syndrome. So I think one of the challenges is to keep on one's toes and keep on re-engineering oneself as one goes along.
Stella, what do you think women have to do to make it in this 21st century?
Well, nothing new, same thing that women have been doing all their lives. You know, we focused, we hard workers, we can multitask. You know, I mean, our mothers did this. You know, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're an entrepreneur. So it's really nothing new. You must just keep doing what has always been done by our mothers, by our grandmothers.
But I can tell you in my profession, journalism, I'll be perfectly frank with you, good journalism sees no gender, sees no race, no nothing. You've got good journalists, you've got bad journalists, and that's it. Is it the same in your entrepreneurial world?
I think in the kind of industry we're in executive search, I think often there are a lot of women in our industry, and I think we do quite well. I think we have that sixth sense that we tap into and use well. I think also, in a way, I think my femininity is part of our competitive advantage. I think women who try and emulate men, I think often miss the trick. I think it's capitalizing on being a woman and loving one's femininity, and I think often that works to good advantage.
Actually, speaking of which, got a little motto here from you, Stella. It says, your motto in life is, a woman who aspires only to reach the level of a man in life is not ambitious enough. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, just, I mean, imagine with us, we run homes, we run businesses, we even help our husbands. And I know you guys would never be able to cope with all that.
Depends on the guy, I suppose. But well, what do you think about that statement? I mean, do you think that women can aspire well ahead of males in any business?
Yeah, I think, you know, Chris, I think it's about partnership. You know, I'm very big on gender partnership. We published the first qualitative research on women on boards in the country, and seeing that women bring something different to boards. So I think when we embrace partnership and diversity, I think we get a better end result.
Is there any time when you've thought, Stella, I mean, you seem to be handling it quite well when you get guys who don't take you seriously, whatever. Is there any time when you thought maybe perhaps you've had enough, when you can't take this anymore? Never.
Never.
Never at all?
Not at all. I would not do it any differently.
Anne, what about you?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Stella. I think it's also about re-engineering oneself. I'm very focused and disciplined about that. Every year I write a life plan, a purpose, a vision, reflect on the year gone by, and set new goals. And I think it's just about onwards and upwards and, you know, one's own growth in that.
Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit more in the second half about these things like the glass ceiling, etc. But just to finish off this half, just tell me how you started out. I mean, how small did you start out when you started as an entrepreneur?
Well, I'm a psychologist by profession, and then I started off working actually for a property company, a commercial property company. And I knew nothing at that point in time, you know, about a commercial. Although I had an idea, because my father's also a developer. Although that side of his business, by the time he started, I'm the eldest at home, so I was already out of, you know, home. And I actually liked it because I was dealing with people. I'm a people's person. So as much as I was not, you know, practicing psychology anymore, but I was going out, meeting clients, different people, and I actually enjoyed it. And I worked there for 2 years, and then I started my own company 2002, and I've never looked back.
And yourself? I mean, you talked about your clothing business you were running. What other little ventures got you along the way when you were young and starting out?
I think, yeah, it was getting experience in different kinds of situations, but in quite a low-risk environment. So while I was doing a full-time MBA at Wits, I had an interest in a curry restaurant in Rocky Street. After that, we launched another fashion clothing business. But I also had the security of kind of full-time corporate employment, and I think that lowered the risk. I was able to build up a year's capital before starting. That was good advice from an FD friend of mine. So I took quite a lot of the risk out early on and got different kinds of experience and kind of turning around businesses, then starting them. And then I was MD of Woodburn Management Selection, and then we decided, you know, let's go on our own, and we turned up globally. But again, I'd learned the industry, so I felt confident about that. I had an established brand within myself. And as I say, again, from a risk management point of view, I think that reduced the risk a lot.
And just both of you, just quickly before we close the half, I mean, when you're walking around, you're not like other people. You're always looking and thinking, that's interesting, I might have a go at that. And I mean, what is it like for you when you're just walking down the street? You always look for opportunities where you can make money. What sort of things do you look at?
I'm very diverse. I look at, I mean, right now, you know, I'm involved in mining, property, and I've just recently launched a cosmetic, you know, shopping, Morningside Shopping Center. So anything that makes sense to me, business-wise, and yeah, so. And
Anne, briefly you're always on the hunt?
Yeah, I think, well, you know, I come from a strategic marketing background in Lever Brothers and Unilever, so I think, you know, I'm always looking at big picture. I listen a lot to people. I also come from a psychology background, economics. So when I hear a gap and a need being expressed, it's like, oh, that's an interesting business concept. And I get very excited about creating new concepts and yeah, going out there and seeing them work.
And just let's talk a little bit more about your business. Now, you place leaders for major companies. Just give us an idea of how difficult and what you actually do.
Yeah, Chris, often when chairmen, CEOs, boards need competent, great leaders in the country, they'll contact us. We've placed a number of South Africa's top leaders, CEOs for MTN. We did the CEO and the FD for Minister Sisulu, for the new housing agency. We've done board members for Tiger, for Avusa, etc. So it's really about hearing what the strategic challenges and objectives are, then defining the right kind of person that's going to meet those objectives and fit into the culture and lead those organizations in terms of their challenges and change.
How difficult is it when someone comes along and says, excuse me, I've got this massive multinational company across the entire continent, find me the right leader? I mean, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, as I said up front, it's really understanding the brief, the strategic challenges, then defining the kind of person that's going to meet those. Then it's a research methodology. So there's a scientific part to our business, which is, you know, where could this person come from, what sort of industry sectors, what kind of companies or organizations. And then there is the artistic part of the process. It's really like a dance of intimacy. We're attracting top people to come and talk to us about potential new marriages with new organizations.
Okay, and Stella, you've got a very mixed bag of companies in your entrepreneurial bag. You've got everything from coal to cosmetics. How difficult is it to keep a track on all of them? There's such different businesses.
It's actually very easy. I'm in partnership in all the businesses with my husband. In fact, we have a company called Masao Investments, which is like the mother company of all these various entities that we're involved in. So he runs or focuses more on the mining side of things, and then I focus more on the property and now recently cosmetics.
And talking about the boardroom, as you were putting people in there, there's still a large complaint, particularly here in corporate South Africa, that women are not getting a fair shake in the boardroom. A lot of boardrooms are still male-dominated. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that's true, Chris. I mean, if you look at the percentages, and particularly of listed holding companies, I think there is still a resistance. The percentages are low, but that's a global trend. So I think there is a resistance. I think the other side of the coin is that South Africa has a very progressive constitution, and I think, you know, there is a lot of encouragement. We see the percentage of women in government is very high. So I think, you know, it's really women's time in South Africa, and women who have a confidence and a belief to get there, I think do. Yes, there are challenges, but I think...
And this is one point I was going to say, Stella, the women who marched on Parliament in the 1950s, they said, if you strike a woman, you strike a rock. Now, the women are tough, as we all know, especially my mother, and what I'm saying is that why is it then women aren't fighting their way into the boardrooms? Why is it women aren't changing this more?
I think generally women are not people who fight, you know, we just prove our point, and in time, you know, and put it, you know, the world will realize that, you know, we don't have to fight it. It will be a natural progression where we will realize is that they actually need women. I mean, can you imagine if there were more women presidents? There wouldn't be half the wars or dramas that are happening in politics.
What do you think of the more women presidents? What do you think?
Yeah, again, I think, you know, we need more feminine energy and leadership. Our research showed that women focus on different things. We have, as mothers and child bearers, we have a natural predisposition towards moral and social conscience and the future of our children and grandchildren. So I think we have a greater sensitivity. I think, yes, businesses have to be financially successful, but when it comes to triple bottom line, we have a greater conscience, I think, about social and environmental issues, our sustainability.
Stella, what would you say to struggling women entrepreneurs out there? I mean, a lot of women I know starting their own businesses, a lot of them are having a hard time because of the factors that we've mentioned in this program. What would you say to people as a psychologist as well?
No, I think also it's a lack of support. So, you know, I'm very fortunate that I'm in a position where I have a lot of support from my family, from my husband, from my children. And that is a key, because they're the ones who make my life easy, you know. I've got the structure at home, I have the structure, you know, at work and around me. And I mean, I'm an only girl with 3 brothers. So that makes it a whole lot easier. And I think sometimes other women maybe are not in the same fortunate position that I'm, you know, I happen to be at, where I've got all this support, not just financially, but emotional support. Because sometimes, as you said, it's not always, you know, easy fitting in all these roles. I mean, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, you know, I'm a businesswoman. So when you've got all this strong support system around you, it really makes it a whole lot easier.
And what would you say to women who perhaps are finding it tough out there to make it as entrepreneurs, from your experience?
I agree with what Stella says, and I think sometimes support comes in different shapes and forms. I think something I learned reading Sam Walton's book, you know, was that often if we need to find out things, phone up experts, ask them if we can go and have lunch with them. And I think, you know, if we put good mentors and coaches around us, I've been incredibly supported by men and women in my life. And often that support comes in different ways. So I would say put the support around you. Yeah, and I think also for mothers, I think it's tough balancing family and kids. I think communicate with one's family, explain those challenges, try and find the unique, special us time. So although this is work-focused and business-focused, you know, still create those special moments to connect. I think that helps the family understand more and support us more.
I mean, was there anything that's happened to you in your entrepreneurial career? Which, I mean, when did you start exactly on your own in business? How many years ago?
I started on my own 10 years ago.
And what would you, is there a moment when you thought, yeah, I've made a real step forward here, not just for me as a person, but for womankind?
Yes, you know, when the business started, for instance, I had a partner who was a female partner. And I mean, within 6 months, you know, it was very difficult at the beginning. And again, going back to the support structure I had, you know, I mean, it was quite amicable. You know, she was like, you know what, I need the financial support, I need this. And, you know, that's when I realized actually how lucky I was, because for me, it was not even, you know, all the challenges that were there at the beginning. There were challenges, but they were not you know, there were non-issues because I had all this support around me, which was very important, you know, and hence it has been not an easy road, but not as hard as most, you know, other women, I suppose, out there would, you know, would have.
Not an easy road. And I mean, what were the times when you thought maybe I've had enough on the way through as an entrepreneur?
I think, you know, I think growing the business is a challenge, because as an entrepreneur, you know, you're still accountable for delivering, and I think you're the lead from the front. So I think growing the business, bringing in other women, and we have trained and developed a lot of women across cultures in our country. I'm very proud of the fact that some of those people have gone on to open their own search businesses and doing well. But I think it's growing it, and I think it's balancing the balls, balancing the external focus, generating business and revenue, keeping clients happy, but also nurturing your people internally. I think sometimes that's been a challenge for me.
What do you think are the key to success, you think, as a woman entrepreneur, Stella?
I think the biggest thing is focus. You know, you've got a plan, and you know there's a goalpost, and just focus and getting there. Yes, there'll be challenges along the way, of course, but I think the key thing is to have structure, to focus and know where you're going, and have your short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and just keep going.
So we're coming near to the end of the show now. So Anne Pratt, you are a person who finds leaders for business. What does the future hold for you, Anne Pratt, as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, good question, Chris. You know, as part of reinventing oneself, what I really want to do as part of my own next step, if you like, is to continue focusing on leaders at the top end of organizations in South Africa, but I also would love to launch a show profiling the unsung heroes of this country. I think there's a lot, everybody's got a story to tell. There's a lot we can learn from people at grassroots level. And there are a lot of great stories of unsung leaders in this country, and I'd love to hear from them and for us to learn from their stories too.
Stella, what's the future hold for Stella Buthelezi?
Well, the future is growing the Masao brand, of course, and, you know, reaching new heights. But for me, as a person, in fact, recently I've just started BNS Foundation, which is Bruce and Stella Foundation. My husband's name is Bruce. And it's something very close to my heart, where I want to start, you know, helping poor communities, especially children, which is something very close to me. Because I find that some didn't have the opportunities and the chances I had. So if I can, you know, I want to give them that chance, and, you know, and some opportunities that I got growing up.
And last but not least, I mean, we both come from small communities. I'm going to ask you, and what about, were you born and bred?
I was born in Pretoria, but I moved to Durban when I was 5 days old. So
okay. We grew up in small communities then. Yeah. But okay, in years to come, when people see you walking down the street, the people you grew up with, and they point you out, what would you like them to say?
There's a woman that lived life fully, that embraced the challenges of this country and did it with an open heart and an open mind.
Stella Buthelezi, go to the Eastern Cape. What would you like people to say? There goes Stella Buthelezi.
Well, I like them to say that it's possible. There she is. She's part of us. She grew up with us, but she made it, and it's possible.